Chapter 1. What on earth is glory? The whole earth is full of His glory. Isaiah 6, verse 3. What is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word glory? Perhaps it suggests images of gold and lights, crowns and jewels. Maybe it calls to mind great achievements or heroic feats. For some, it speaks of what belongs solely to heaven itself, a state of perfection and serenity far from the struggle and day-to-day experience of earth, the state we hope to enter at the end of our earthly lives. For others, it suggests what we have fallen short of because of sin. See Romans 3, verse 23. Glory fills the pages of the Bible. But like many of the great, rich biblical words, I fear glory is often abstract and lacks immediate connection in our minds and experience. In the images it does conjure up, crowns or heroic deeds don't seem to help us much in comprehending the significance of what Scripture means by the word. In his famous address, The Weight of Glory, C.S. Lewis describes the poverty that many of us bring to an understanding of glory, a poverty that makes glory appear strange and confusing. There is no getting away from the fact that glory is very prominent in the New Testament and in early Christian writings. All this makes no immediate appeal to me at all, and in that respect, I fancy I am a typical modern. Glory suggests two ideas to me, of which one seems wicked and the other ridiculous. Either glory means to me fame, or it means luminosity. As for the first, since to be famous means to be better known than other people, the desire for fame appears to me as a competitive passion, and therefore of hell rather than heaven. As for the second, who wishes to become a kind of living electric light bulb? But Lewis goes on to explain that when he put aside his initial confusion, dug deeper into the language of the Scriptures, and allowed Scripture to challenge and expand his thinking, he discovered the reason Scripture resounds with the word glory and with promises that we will have it. He saw that glory is what we were made for. See Isaiah 43, verse 7. This book represents my own journey into the language of the Bible in search of a deeper understanding and experience of glory. As it did with Lewis, the journey happened to me, but once it did, I found myself embroiled in a treasure hunt in which a series of intriguing clues led me to one discovery after another. And eventually, I found that glory had begun to unfold in my mind and heart as the word that contained my deepest longings, my highest priorities, and my destiny, as well as the conviction that it contained those things for everyone else on the planet. As a result of this unfolding, the promise of Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 14 took on an increasing weight and significance. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. Interestingly, this verse is often misquoted by the simple omission of the word knowledge. This omission gives rise to a vision of the earth being gradually covered by a sort of vapor that drips down from heaven and eventually engulfs the planet in bright gold. Wonderful though that vision might be, it can leave us waiting for an appearance of glory that is completely outside of us, distracting us from the powerful invitation in this verse, the invitation to know what glory is, and ultimately to live in a world where everyone shares that knowledge. Another reason we cannot afford to leave out knowledge from the promise of Habakkuk is that its omission turns the fullness of God's glory on the earth into a future event rather than a present reality. When the prophet Isaiah saw the Lord enthroned, he heard the angels declaring, The whole earth is full of his glory. Isaiah 6, verse 3. The truth is that God's glory is not far from us. It is actually the reality that surrounds us. The whole human history of falling short of the glory of God has not diminished it in any way. Neither has our failure to perceive it. It is impossible for us to erase God's glory from the universe. As C.S. Lewis wrote, a man can no more diminish God's glory by refusing to worship him than a lunatic can put out the sun by scribbling the word darkness on the walls of his cell. In light of Isaiah's vision that the earth is already full of God's glory, the prophecy of Habakkuk is God's promise that the gap between the imminent reality of his glory in the universe and our perception of that glory will be closed. The fullness of God's glory will be matched by the fullness of our knowledge. Understanding this promise, however, depends upon understanding what knowledge is. The Hebrew word translated knowledge in this verse is yada, the same word used in Genesis 4:1, which says that Adam knew Eve. Yada indicates an intimate, experiential knowing, and what is more, one that results in reproduction. The very nature of yada tells us that the promise of Habakkuk will not be fulfilled all at once, but will unfold through a continuous process of relational encounters, just as Adam and Eve experienced in a lifelong covenant. In our world of the internet and modern viral marketing, we are increasingly aware of how quickly experiences can multiply, and I like to think that these technologies are a parable of what this multiplication of knowledge may mean in part. Capturing an experience on a video or audio recording and sharing it with the world now takes hardly any time and effort at all. Through social networking websites, one video clip can go overnight from one person to millions. One person can laugh at the antics of a little child, and with the sweep of a mouse, that experience can be transmitted to thousands of homes across the globe in seconds. The reproduction of information has become a part of our everyday lives. Of course, how it will happen is secondary to that it will happen. We are promised not merely that we will know about glory, but that we will experience it, live in it, and encounter it. And because God's glory is a present reality, it is a promise that we are invited to experience now. God's expressions. I have found, as Lewis and countless others have through the centuries, that words are keys that can unlock experiences for us. A journey into the language of glory is vital in preparing us to perceive and experience the glory that fills the earth. Therefore, throughout this book, I will be exploring various words and what they yield for us in our perception of glory, beginning with the word glory itself. God's glory is the result of God expressing Himself. In other words, everything He has made and does, and the attributes, nature, and power behind those actions are His glory. It is said of artists that they do at least two things: they copy and express themselves. But God is the artist who has nothing to copy, at least to begin with, so He just expresses Himself. All things came into being through Him, and apart from Him nothing came into being that has come into being. John 1, verse 3. He is the originator of all things. This reality positions us to look for the revelation of glory in the various ways God expresses Himself, and to have both glory and God's expressions expand in our field of perception. If we study God, we will become familiar with what glory looks like, and as we study His expressions, we will become more and more familiar with Him. What is God like? What does He say? what does he do? The answer to these questions will reveal his glory. Our two greatest resources in studying the expressions of God are the Bible and creation, the book of Scripture and the book of nature, as they have been called. Scripture identifies creation as God's expression through which we learn who He is. For since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made. Romans 1, verse 20. When we look at creation, we see God. We see His invisible attributes in a mother's love for her children. We see His eternal power through telescopes that reveal an enormous universe full of unimaginably powerful heavenly bodies and events. Closer to home, we experience His power in great waterfalls, mighty oceans, and sunlight that travels 93 million miles and yet retains enough heat to warm this beautiful planet. We see His divine nature in the way He created the human body to heal itself. God expressed Himself in His creation, and He didn't hide it. He is clearly seen in what He made. How offensive it is that the study of creation has been so perverted by godless theories when it was designed by God to reveal Himself to us. Society's refusal to acknowledge the designer and source of all that exists is a fatal rejection of the first principles for gaining the knowledge of the glory of God. The Bible is also God's expression. All Scripture is inspired by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, for training in righteousness. 2 Timothy 3, verse 16. Though written by multiple authors in different languages, spanning thousands of years, the Bible's consistent message and revelation of God is undeniable. As we read the Bible, God is revealed to us, and His nature, attributes, and power are written across every page. It is even more mind-blowing that this very text also invites us to be imitators of the awesome God it reveals. See Ephesians 5, verse 1. Creation and the Bible do not merely symbolize or communicate God's glory, they actually possess it in themselves. This suggests an expanded definition of glory, based on Romans 1, verse 20. Glory is the eternal value that someone or something has because it reveals, points to, and reflects the attributes, nature, and power of God. This definition accords us glory, for we are among God's expressions that reveal, point to, and reflect His attributes, nature, and power. In fact, along with revealing God's glory, creation and the Bible not only reveal that we have glory, they also reveal that among all that God has made, among His manifold expressions, human beings were designed to relate to His glory in a unique way. We will explore our unique relationship to glory, as well as the glory of creation and the Bible throughout this book. For the moment, however, I want to draw your attention to the only other verse in Scripture in which we find the phrase, the knowledge of the glory of God. Significantly, it is referred to in the past tense, another confirmation that Yada, of God's glory, is not reserved solely for the next life. For God, who said, "Light shall shine out of darkness," is the one who has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ. 2 Corinthians 4, verse 6. Here we find Paul comparing two creative acts of God. God's first creative act was to command light out of darkness. Later, He performed a similar creative act, one with equal power, drama, and impact. But this time, He commanded light to shine out of the darkness of our hearts. What was the source of that darkness? It was a rejection of glory. Because that, when they knew God, they glorified Him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Romans 1, verse 21. In ignorance and deception, mankind turned from the light of God's glory only to discover that there is no other source of light in the universe. That light went off when they turned from glory. But when the light went on again, it was a different expression. God, who had first expressed Himself as Creator, now expressed Himself as the merciful Redeemer. Thus, the knowledge of His glory in the face of Christ is different than the knowledge of His glory that Adam and Eve beheld in their innocence. In the face of Christ, we see the eternal value God has for us, evidenced by the price He paid to restore us to the place where we could behold His glory and be restored to the glory we had fallen short of. The knowledge of the glory of God, the knowledge that Habakkuk prophesied would fill this earth, is revealed in the face of Christ. But according to Paul, the true significance of God shining on our hearts, the true effect and value of the knowledge of the glory of God is this: we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as from the Lord, the Spirit. 2 Corinthians 3, verse 18. The knowledge of the glory of God, gained in this relational posture of beholding Christ, makes us like Him. In other words, the intimacy of Yada does not merely reproduce encounters with Christ, it reproduces His nature and likeness within us. We were first created and then redeemed in order to be like God. No other part of God's creation was designed to bear His image, and thus no other part of His creation has the same glory we have. As Bill Johnson regularly points out, yes, God does say that He won't share His glory with another, but we're not another. We are made in His image, glorious. We are His body, His bride, and His children. We are not usurpers or pretenders. We are image bearers. The knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ reveals our own glory, the glory He made us to share with Him from the beginning. And if we were made for glory, then there is one question that must possess us. What on earth is glory?